Okay, everybody, welcome to Fridays with Sue and Steph. And it's really snowy in Cleveland, and I think 2 days of school canceled, and like lots of emails saying this is closed. Oh, I went to the grocery store yesterday. I was
Oh,
the last one in. They said we're closing early. Yeah,
what
I
time
don't
was
ever.
that?
What's up with that? There was a
What
big
time
storm.
was that?
Oh, that
What's up
was
with that?
that was like maybe 4:30, I think.
Hmm.
So around there. Anyway, but I got in, I got my ingredients for my really very delicious supper that I made. And Stephanie is what?
My son just arrived with a coffee for me. And I feel
Oh, look
bad.
at
I
what
feel like
you
I
did
want to
good.
pass it through the screen to you.
No, I got mine. I got
Oh,
mine.
good.
Okay, today we are going to talk about, so last week we talked about the things that we didn't do well. And, it wasn't like a woe is me, and it wasn't like I was a terrible parent. It was just like, as we learn and grow, things that we might have done differently.
We reflected. We reflected.
That's great. We reflected.
Mhm.
And so this week we thought in this series, we should be doing what we did right, which, is typically a hard thing to do. It's kind of like a
Here's
Facebook
my
Mark.
list.
Well, that's not really true. I know.
No.
But, anyway, it's a little bit like Facebook, where you can kind of watch other people doing it and feeling like maybe it borders on bragging and maybe it didn't need to be said.
Yeah.
So we put out there that we're going to try to walk that fine line of telling you the things that we think we did well without coming off as sounding like in any way we think we were perfect parents.
And if you think that, you can rewatch last week.
Yeah.
Right?
So check out last week's for some equilibrium here.
Exactly.
Hi, Jerry. Glad to see you here. Jerry got in early today.
I'm
And we
Papa
also
Jerry.
want to invite everybody watching to jump in with what they've done well, because we do a lot of like reflecting and feeling like we could have done it better, but sometimes it's healthy to embrace the fact that we get a lot right. And I think as parents, as moms in particular, we're loving and we're caring, and if we really dig deep, we've done a lot of really good. So I you want to start, Steph?
Sure. So I had to my husband threw this one out, and he's totally right. So one thing that was really important to me, and it would make me crazy when it didn't happen, was, and especially the kids are playing sports and we're running in a million directions, and again in the perfection category, like baseball season, this does not apply. Like there were times where this fell completely away, right? Family dinner. So that was something that, like, I think we heard it from experts a lot. And it's funny, I have friends who, it's not even family dinner, it's carved out time together. So I had friends where like that didn't work, but they used to do family breakfast. Right? It doesn't matter. And the idea is that like you're around the table and it's purposeful and it's intentional, and it's the expectation is that we are eating as a family, because there is just a lot of information that gets passed around, even if that meal lasted 15 minutes or 20 minutes or whatever. So I would say that was one that, like, I would say the value matched with the execution.
That's great. I think I'm not sure that information was shared at my table, but bonding was it was definitely a check-in.
That's better said.
Well, no, because I think maybe your table did have sharing. I'm not sure that mine was a reporting time.
Yeah.
And it wasn't for lack of trying, but it was a moment to just know you're loved, like to just sit together and know that you belong to this family. But I wouldn't say like one of the things that I put on my list was that, and I know my kids would say that I didn't, but they don't know how far I moved. I learned how to be more silent. And one of the places that I excelled at it, but that's because the motive was there, was when I was driving and there were kids in the car.
Yeah.
I wanted to be invisible, because that's where information came out that would never be told to me. And when they got their licenses, I was aware of how I lost that moment for two reasons. One is there's this kind of opportunity to look forward and have conversations that might not happen face to face with you looking at each other. That really stuff came out that way. But also like little bit like when you say to yourself, I wish I was a fly on the wall.
Yeah, totally.
I kind of was as the driver when there were a group of friends together in the car. They forgot about me. But I work on it even more with adult children, and just in general, like I like to spar. I like to be in a conversation. I like to be sharing, and that doesn't always work for kids, our kids.
Yeah.
Like I don't mean
Yeah.
my kids, but like I can do that with your kids probably, and they'd be fine,
Totally.
right? But
Totally.
so anyway,
Mhm.
if you are a talker and you have some not talkers, learning how to step back a little bit, and I would say that's true in the mismatch of, you know, mom and kid every time. Like if you're a quiet person and you have a talker kid, you might have to up it. But for me, I had to go the other direction because I have some not talkers.
Such a good one. It's such a good one. It's funny when you said that about like sparring with them, and it's funny. I didn't know you at this time, and so you will talk about like babies and loving having babies, and it's funny because I always think of myself as the babies were fine, but I enjoyed more of the as they got older and the sparring and the discussing. But it's funny because I think, and maybe it's your personality, maybe you've just moved with each stage, and like you love the baby stage when you're in it and you love the sparring right. It's just kind of interesting.
No, that's one of the things I did write down was I really have just loved being a mom.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean like it was always like steady like this. It just means I really felt grateful to have the opportunity to be these kids' mom.
Yeah,
like, really,
I feel, yeah, that's gonna make me cry. Yes. Yes.
So, I mean, and transitions are really hard. Like
Yeah.
transitioning from having babies to having willful toddlers, that's a jump, and it continues to happen. And even adjusting to adult children is like another moment of trying. But I will say that I work hard at figuring out how that next stage is going to work for us and what I have to do to adjust what I thought was our relationship 10 years ago can't possibly be what it is now.
Yeah. So. It's interesting. So the next one I have, and it's two that kind of go together. So I had written down one thing and Todd just threw something at me and I was like, oh, those all kind of fit together. So he was saying, he's like, you're really good at listening without fixing. Like that you're just, which is such a your teen thing we learned, right?
I even remember when you started doing it. I literally remember who said it. It was Lisa Moore, and you had heard her at school, or maybe just one of our things because it was before that. And we were like, oh,
that's a thing. Yeah, I can do that. So this whole idea, right, listening without fixing. But I think what also skates up next to it, what I wrote was, it was this idea that I can let them fall, but not completely fail. Right. So like I was okay with the stumbles and stuff. I'm trying to think, there are definitely moments where it was like, okay, I've got to intervene here on some level. But it's funny. I was just telling somebody this recently. Like, I feel like, and maybe, well, not maybe, it's definitely a routine thing. I feel like because of our experience, I've been able to, I always say it's like, people talk about helicopter parenting. I said, I feel like I'm like the submarine parent where like I sit under the water and I'm like, wait, did the water temperature just change? Like I can like you detect and then I'm like surface. So I may look on the surface literally and figuratively, like, I don't know what's going on. Cause I really don't. Like there are some things like where I'll hear people talking and I'm thinking, I have no idea. Like they'll be like, oh, and my kid had 3 tests and then they had this. And then they're like, oh, I remember somebody asking me if Liam was taking the SAT or the ACT. And I'm like, they're like, I am so impressed that you don't even know the answer to that. I'm like, impressed or horrified in today's society. But like that ability to like give them, the other word I wrote was like agency, like putting it in their court, knowing that I was like there to cheer them on. I always had their back, but I didn't have to fix things for them. Such a routine thing.
Yeah. But that is how you parent. That's really true. Hi, Kim. Happy to have you here. If you have anything to add, put it in the chat. Okay. So I have one that really took me a long time to get to, which is letting them be mad at me.
Oh.
And that was really hard for me. I needed quick resolution. Like I felt like we should sit down and talk, which I think killed my first 2 because they were the ones who thought that, like, oh my God, no, I don't want to peel the layers apart here. And then just realizing, like, sometimes you get mad and then you get not mad. And
Yeah.
it doesn't all need to have a deeper meaning and a relationship problem. And that for me is just really hard. Like sitting with that feeling of a kid up in their room, really hating me, really angry with me. Or vice versa, or they did something and they're mad. Even, I mean, what it all turns to is that they're mad about the situation. I can also feel mad in return, but how do you just sit with that? So that's something, took a lot of time to try to, work through it, and it's not consistent, but when I get it, when I can do it, I feel good about it.
It's interesting. Were you raised, did you talk through things with your parents?
Well, I didn't have I had two parents, but they were never on the same page of parenting.
Okay.
But my mother did like to come and like peel back all the layers.
Yeah.
So I think it was probably a default mode for me because I lived with it.
Yeah.
Not that I liked it, by the way, but it was like,
I was curious because I feel like it's like, as I'm listening to you, I'm like, oh, we never did that. And I probably do it more with the kids because that's how Todd grew up that way. It was like, you don't go to bed mad. You, like, his mom would like yank him out of bed and like, we're going to talk about this, and I was like, I don't even know if my parents knew when I went to bed. Like so different. No, that's a good one. That's a good one. Okay. My next one was chores. So yeah,
you win at this one. You win at this one.
I don't win at chores. My sister would win at chores. I would win at like, clean up after the whole around meals. Yeah, really good at that. Like that we gotta, and that I'm going to credit that one to Julie Schmidt, who may or may not be listening, because I remember talking to her and she was saying something about the kids loading the dishwasher. And I was like, oh my God, I would end up with like 12 broken dishes and, and glasses. And she's like, well, you have to decide what's more important. And I was like, oh, that was such a good one. It was such a good one. I was like, oh, that is so interesting, right? Like looking at the dishwasher, and I'm not even, Todd's way more fastidious. Like he loads it a certain way, would reload. It's funny. We're switched like so many things in spouses. In my spousal relationship, we're opposite of what's typical. And I don't care really I don't think I care how the dishwasher is loaded till I see it like egregiously poorly loaded. But my bar is a little, I have a lower bar for like what I think is like poor loading. But again, as my son Ethan says, best thing about it is it doesn't affect me.
Well, the thing I loved when you talked about it was it felt like a family. Like it wasn't like, the mom makes the dinner, the mom cleans off the table. It was like the family is involved in the meal. I like that.
Yeah.
I get it. I do it sometimes when they're all coming home, but I don't, it's not done in a way that everyone feels responsible for it. I miss that moment, but I have to make a chore chart.
Yes. You've done it very well you've made that a great adjustment on family vacations on that.
I am good at that. I am good at
for real. That's impressive.
Well, that was a few family vacations where I was bitter because I was spending the time in the kitchen while they're out at the beach or something.
Isn't that how we get to every solution? You have to move through the bitter and angry.
Okay, here's one of mine, which again, it was a process of getting better at it. But I just brought this up in a podcast, in a Facebook Live yesterday, that it was Rachel Simmons, who I heard speak years ago, who talked about when your kid comes home from school and tells you a terrible social dynamic that took place, and the next day they come home from school and you greet them at the door with, how did it go? What did she say? And as Rachel Simmons was saying it, I was like, oh my God, she's talking to me. That's me. And she, described how not good that is for your kids. Like, let them own the emotion of the social dynamic, and you just be there if they need you to talk to them. And so with one of my kids, there was a friendship that was faltering, and I was friends with the mom, and the mom would call me up and she'd say, you want to get coffee because, they're not getting along. Let's talk about what we could do. And I said, so I'm happy to get coffee with you, but not about that topic. Like, I'm not getting involved. And then I didn't see her for a long time, and she said, "Hey, I haven't seen you for a while." So it was a good friend. I said, "I've kind of been avoiding you. You're scaring me."
I totally remember that.
Yeah. But the
Totally.
best part of this story is that she called me. She actually babysat for my kids when I first had them, and then my fourth and her first were good friends. And she called me years later and said, "Okay, I'm you now. Someone just called about one of my younger kids and wanted to get coffee." And I'm like, "I'm going to tell you what Sue Morrison told me." And she's like, "We're not getting into this. They will figure this out." Anyway, I was good at that. At least by number 4, I was good
Oh
at that.
my God. It's so hard. It's so hard. So my last one is, and I touched on it earlier, was just that they knew that we always had their best interest at heart. Like whatever. And it didn't mean that, like, you say something, somebody gets mad, like what you were saying, right? And I would always insert, like, like, we always have your best interest. And I think they got that, and their best interest was different than their siblings, and like, right, like what that child adolescent needed at that time, that we were going to be there for whatever that was. So I think they got that.
All right, well, that's too good to top. So we're going to end on that one. That was a great one, Steph. And we didn't get any input from the audience, but you can put it in later if you're watching and you want to just share something that you did well. Give yourself a pat on the back. It's not bragging. It's important to do. Oh, I am going to say that in the silent category, I think I've brought this up before, but I have 2 friends I meet for coffee every Friday, and we had this stretch of time where we would tell each other what we didn't say, which was bragging. We really thought, like, let's brag about the restraint we showed in not saying what we wanted to say, and it turned into such a joyful time. Like, it was so much laughter. And anyway, so if you have those friends and you want to give yourself a charge of, like, listening without reacting to your kids or whatever it is that gets your ire up, it was a really fun exercise to have friends to turn to and say, "I wrote it down, what I didn't say this week." Was really fun. Anyway, good to be with all of you. We will see you next Friday. Have a great week.
Bye, guys.